It's day 10 of the fast, and I've lost 19.5 pounds. The shirt, which was very form-fitting on day 1, is now getting looser and looser by the day. So it feels pretty good to have lost close to 20 pounds in 10 days. Now today, I'm going to focus this video on an important question: is Qigong a religion? So stay tuned to the rest of this video for a thorough answer to that question. Before I do that, I just want to say that we're at day 10, and if you've been finding value in these videos, then I suggest, I ask you rather, to subscribe to this channel. It would really help. The more subscribers we have, the more other people, new people, can find this content on YouTube. That's how the rankings work. So that would help us, and it would also help you to receive these additional videos on an ongoing basis that I'm committed to creating. We're just going to keep going with this. So something came up in my personal life. When I was making the first week of videos, I hadn't shared any of this. I just wanted to sort of have a bunch of videos published before I started sharing it to people, so that there was more than just one video to look at. So I started sharing this to some of my personal social media, and a question that I half expected would come up quickly is Qigong a religion? Now the short answer is no. Qigong has nothing to do with religion. It's not any more of a religion than surfing or any type of serious hobby. Without just leaving it there and saying, take my word for it, it's not a religion, I want to explain why I think some people might have that question, or even possibly get that impression without learning much about Qigong. Just on the surface, how it could look that Qigong might possibly be some type of religious thing. So I'm going to delve a little bit more deeply into that in the next few minutes. The first aspect of why someone might consider Qigong to be a religion would be that, okay, we're learning a bit of a philosophy and a practice of wellness, similar to being like, someone goes out and becomes a vegan. That's a change in your habits. That's a change in your lifestyle. Doing Qigong doesn't require being a vegan. They're not related to each other, although it's perfectly acceptable for a vegan person to do Qigong. Someone who eats only meat could do Qigong. Qigong is accessible to Christians, to Buddhists, to atheists. Anyone can really do it, because Qigong itself really doesn't have anything specifically to do with religion. But I think part of why it might seem that way is because we're in the Western world. We have our Western ideas, and when you start to learn about Qigong, there's a few things that might stand out. One would just be the language. It's a different culture, and Qigong is a different philosophy and a different way of looking at things to change your habits and to integrate your mind and body together, and to create harmony between yourself and the world around you. Now, religion certainly does have methods and ways of thinking related to that. So, if you go really deeply into these areas, you can find some parallels and some bridges there. But it doesn't mean that that's what it really is all about. So I think the language initially is just, you're hearing these different words that you don't fully understand their meaning because you haven't studied it yet, and it's from a different culture, so you might think, well, is there some kind of religious agenda behind that? I don't fully understand it, so it sounds religious-y, it sounds mystical, it's mysterious, because I don't understand it yet, because I haven't really researched it or learned about it. So I think the first thing would be maybe just the language itself, the words of it. The second aspect would be Qigong is usually taught, it's usually a mentor-student type of relationship, and that's just, it's the best way to teach anything. If you want to become a carpenter, you become an apprentice to a carpenter. If you want to learn about a religion, you would go to a church service. And so this type of mentorship is not unique to Qigong. It's just the best way to learn. So some people might see, well, there's this person teaching something, and then they have, kind of a following. They're teaching a class, or they have a bunch of people that are learning from it, and that might come across as looking like, well, are they some kind of religious guru? I think, the minds of maybe back in, the stuff that came from India in the 60s, you had all these guru type of people. I'm not saying that's bad, but I think maybe some people may think that the same things happen with Qigong. It's actually not like that. So that's another thing. And the third thing would just be not understanding what Qigong is. So I'm going to try to put what Qigong is into a better perspective and show you, what it's trying to do and the way it's trying to operate that should hopefully help you realize that it's not a religion. So it's looking at the system, okay? So the system of life and the way things are connected is really what is at the heart of Qigong. So I have to tell an analogy to get this point across the best. So if we look at a tree, now in the Western world, in our right and wrong, left and right brain, everything is just this polarity, good, bad. That's how we think in the Western world, okay? But there is a different way to look at things. So if we look at a tree in our Western mind, we want to kind of pull the tree out of the ground, hold it up here, and then take a picture of it and say, that's a tree, okay? Now, in one way of thinking, that certainly is a tree, pull it out of the ground. But if you look at the tree more deeply, you could say, well, where does the tree end? Okay, so, in our minds, we'd love to just pull it out of the ground, have the tree, have all the roots, and then that's the tree. But if you really start to think about it and just not have any preconceived ideas, where does the tree really end? Because what happens to the tree if you do pull it out of the ground? Well, it immediately starts to die. It needs the soil. What happens to the tree if you take the air away from it? So all of a sudden it cannot get any air. The tree no longer is a tree. It may look like one, but it starts to die. It cannot survive. What happens to the tree? Is the tree the sun? What happens to the tree with no sun? Same thing. So on that level, it's not a fine line of separation. They all are interdependent. They all need each other, right? The air needs the tree needs the air. These things are connected. And then where does it end? You can look more deeply on another level and say, well, the tree is the sun because the sunlight actually goes into the tree, and through photosynthesis, the tree takes that energy and stores it in its physical body. So they're very intimately connected. What Qigong is doing is looking at these deeper relationships. So within our own body, we have trillions of cells. Now, if you looked at the cell under a microscope, you could say, wow, that's its own living thing. That's a brain cell, that's a heart cell, that's a fat cell. And looking in this little microscopic window, you see that little cell. You might not even see any of its neighbors. You just see it kind of happily dancing. It goes and eats something. That cell's alive. It exists on its own in a way. And if all of those cells were not cooperating and somehow fighting each other, we get into issues like having cancer. If the cells in our body could all be in harmony, we would be healthy. Well, our mind actually controls the chemistry of our body. Our mood affects our health. Common sense, everyone has a sense of that if you're depressed, you're going to be more likely to get sick. If you're really happy, you're probably going to be healthier. So your mind, it's all connected, right? Your emotions affect your health affects your emotions, and Qigong is really just a practice to pay more closely attention to how your body works. And it goes more deeply than that, because are we just a body? Is there more to it? Well, sure. We have a connection with our environment. So we're connected to the things around us. And so the concept that connects us, although there are many layers to this idea, would be the concept of Qi. So the Chinese, through Chinese medicine, through thousands of years, they've had this concept of Qi, which is universal energy. Now, the Chinese people were not the only ones that have this idea. Modern science confirms that everything is made of energy. When you zoom down to the smallest level, everything is made of energy. We're basically all made of light. And modern science has also concluded with, they're pretty certain that that energy is conscious. Okay, so here, the fact that now you have the whole universe, me, you, everything, it's all made of energy. When we zoom down to a certain level, we're made of atoms. Everything in the universe is made of atoms. When you zoom down to another level, in the quantum level, with subatomic particles, everything ends up being made out of light. And they've done a lot of experiments to say that energy is conscious. You know, when it's observed, it changes its behavior. When it's not being watched, it's not doing anything. As soon as you start to watch it, it behaves differently. So you could look at that purely scientifically and say, well, okay, that's pretty neat. It's just the substance that we're all made of. But the interesting thing is, if you go deep enough into that concept, you could keep it there and not make it a religious thing and say, okay, we're all made of stuff, and that stuff's energy, and that's just the building blocks of nature. Now, you are hitting sort of the back door of where religion comes in, because religion says, well, hey, the thing that designed the universe is called God. So God's not a bearded man sitting in the sky. God is the ultimate universal power that controls everything. God is the all-knowing, omnipresent thing. Like, if you believe in God, that's what God is. So, we may just be splitting hairs here on what we call it. If you want to be a scientific atheist, then it's just energy, and it's just sort of like the substance, the building blocks of what we're made of. But if you do believe in God, that is a total explanation and proof that God exists, because what else would God be? God's everywhere. God is the thing that the universe is made of, and there's a consciousness. But you see, we talk about language. So certain people who are raised with maybe some kind of fundamentalist religious background, they hear the word consciousness and they freak out. Well, Christians, Hindus, Buddhists, atheists, Muslims, consciousness is just being aware that you're aware of something. So maybe the word consciousness has different connotations for different people. So yes, if you get deeply philosophically into these ideas, then they do start to border on and ask questions that, just like science and religion tend to, when you go deep enough, they start to try to answer the same questions that need a further explanation that we just don't have. There needs to be some sort of faith involved on, this is the limit of our understanding, what we can observe, but, and that leads us to believe in something else. In the science, you just sort of try to take that out of the equation. But when you go to that deep level, that is a pretty good description of God, right? So back to what Qi energy is. Other scientific discoveries have proved that the universe, if you just look at the way the planets move around each other and the way the galaxies move, it's, without a doubt, it shows that all of the matter, all of the stuff that we can observe in the universe only makes up 4% of what's out there. Now, there's this mysterious other stuff that makes up 96% of the universe that we cannot measure, we cannot see it, we can't interact with it, light doesn't reflect off it. It's completely invisible, and you would never know it's there other than we see the effect of it. We see that there's this 96% of stuff that's invisible, that's not there, that's actually controlling the 4% of stuff that is there. The 4% would not move and react that way without that invisible 96%. So there's a scientific way to understand that, and then there's, the religion way would say, well, that's God. God's that what you're calling that 96% force, and then you would just say, well, hey, God's everything because he's also in the 4%. Uh, Now, my biggest thing is, there's a lot of people in religion who will say, well, okay, if it's not in the Bible, then it can't be true. My perspective would be, okay, the Bible is this truth, it's this wisdom. So if I see something in the Bible, and then I see something that is proven, like when you prove something, like yes, in nature that works that way. Hey, there's no argument here. It doesn't have to be a battle between religion and science. Hey, you believe the Bible, and if you look at the Bible and say, well, that seems maybe at odds with this, I would just offer this, that God created the system. God created how everything works. So, if we can prove something in reality, then I think we may be misunderstanding what the Bible's trying to say there, because they should agree. There's many layers and meanings to the Bible, and if we have something that's pretty clear cut, we see the beauty of what God's created in how that works. So there's no reason to say, well, that thing that we're proving is true can't be true because the Bible says otherwise. There's a lot of different interpretations, and I think we need to look for how they actually harmonize and agree with each other, and look for how the Bible probably does actually maybe say that's true, because the Bible is the ultimate truth as well, right? So, back to the concept of Qi energy making up everything. So just understanding that there's this energy that makes up everything. Our bodies are made of it, and it's really just about coming into harmony with that, because we are not separate from our environment. Like, we aren't separate from the earth. We are not separate from our solar system. We are not separate from our families. We're not separate from our country. We are a part of everything. Everything is literally connected. And they've discovered that there is a field connecting all of us. We have to leave room for the fact that there's a lot we don't understand about how things work. There are a lot of deep mysteries. And I have limited time, and I cannot re-record this video, so my cell phone alarm went off. I just silenced that. Sorry for the interruption. I will try to make sure that doesn't happen in the future. But the concept of this universal energy field is not a new idea. This was an idea that was held throughout the Middle Ages in Europe. They had this concept. Back in ancient Greece, the concept of an ether was actually something that most people believed, including religious people, believed that there was this concept of an ether, an energy that fills all of space. I mean, the Hindus had that concept as prana. The Hawaiians had the concept as mana. It goes by different names. Native Americans had their own understanding of it. This is something that we understood, most of us, maybe 200 years ago and prior to that. The reason why that concept got lost is because in the late 1800s, as science started to evolve, they started to try to test it. And in making those tests, their instruments weren't sensitive enough to detect it, so the test failed. And then they said, well, there's not this universal energy field that connects us all. They've actually repeated those same experiments that people for over 150 years, or around 150 years, have been using to say that there's not a universal energy field. They repeated those experiments, and the experiments actually, with more sensitive instruments, showed that that field exists, that we are all connected. So you've heard of the concept of the butterfly effect, how a butterfly flapping his wings in Africa could theoretically set off a chain of events where on the other side of the world it would create a typhoon, because it just one tiny change can affect something on the other side of the world in a profound way, just kind of with the snowball effect. Well, the butterfly effect is a concept that they've made movies about it, and it's a pretty interesting thing to think about. You can also think about the changes in your life. If your grandfather had never met your grandmother, well, a lot would be different, at least in your life. And in all of those people that your parents touched, your parents don't exist because the grandparents never met. So in all of those lives, they're deeply affected. You cannot understand the profound impact that it would have had for them not to meet. Well, there's so many decisions we make all the time. That's just to illustrate the fact that we're all connected. Another beautiful analogy is we all breathe the same air. The air that's in my lungs right now, just because of statistics, because there's so many particles of air that exist on the earth, and when they go up in the atmosphere, winds blow around and they rain down. So over time, each one of the particles of air, in my lungs, actually gets distributed kind of evenly around the earth. So I have a couple particles, molecules of air that were in Jesus' lungs. Okay? I have a couple that were in Buddha's lungs. I have a couple that were in Hitler's lungs. We're all connected in that sense too, and that's a fact. Like statistically, there's so many. There's billions and trillions. Like when you take a breath of air, you're breathing in so many particles of air that just the odds are you're breathing in some air that everyone who's ever breathed in the past, some of that air is in your lungs because the air doesn't go away. The air just, we breathe it in, we breathe it out, and it gets recycled through nature. So, pretty interesting thing to contemplate. So, the idea is that while Qigong could be taken to some kind of religious level, it's not in and of itself a religion. There are certain types of Qigong, like there's a Buddhist version of Qigong where they took Qigong and then they made it more Buddhist. In the future, I'm going to create some videos that show you how you could do Qigong as a Christian type of practice. I mean, doing Qigong by itself it's not a Christian practice. It's not meant to be a Christian-only practice. It's also not meant to be like a non-Christian, anti-Christian, practice either. I'm a Christian and I do Qigong. But Qigong, they're separate things. You could be a Christian and do Qigong. You could be a Buddhist and do Qigong. You could be a Muslim and do Qigong. You could be an atheist and you could still do Qigong. The same as if you wanted to go surfing. People who get deeply into surfing, when you get super intense with it, it sort of starts to look like a religion, right? There's a devotion to it, and there is a spiritual connection through surfing or through doing anything, to a serious level. And you can do anything serious in life as a devotion to God. Saint Francis of Assisi, that's basically what he was all about. He just said, whatever you do it to the best of your ability. There's no need to rush. Take your time. Do it as good as you can do it. Do it as well as you can. Give that to God. Let God have the results. And then if you spend 3 years building this elaborate wall and you built the best wall you can, and then if it's destroyed tomorrow, then there's no fear. You did that to serve God. You did that as a devotion. And then what do you do the next day? You can just start building it again. You're not worried about it. It's the action of doing as a devotion that could be applied to any religion. And if you don't believe in a religion, then Qigong itself could be just a devotion to your health. It could be a devotion to whatever you want it to be. Some religious people think that possibly everything you do should be like 100% God-centered. Well, Qigong would easily be something that could be that. But it doesn't have to be. And I don't believe that everything in life, sometimes, if you cook a nice dinner as a meal with your friends, I think God would understand that maybe you may spend that evening not really thinking about God. I don't think God's narcissistic. I think God is happy to see us getting along and being kind to each other. And of course, we connect with him and talk to him and have the relationship we want. And if we want it to be deeper, it can be deeper. But I think God is bigger than that. I think God understands. I think it's very pleasing to God. Whether you believe in God or not, it's a good thing if we're kind to each other and we do good and try to help each other. I think that is what all religions talk about at their core anyway. And so for my Christian friends who may be watching this video or learning about Qigong, Qigong is not a religious thing. I am not trying to make it a religious-only thing. I'm trying to be fair and make it accessible to everyone because that's what it is. It doesn't matter what you believe. And we need more of that in the world. We can't be attacking people that have different beliefs. We all have different beliefs. That's our right. We're here to figure it out, figure out what works for us, figure out what's true for us, and we shouldn't be afraid if other people are doing the same. We should also be able to talk openly about those things. So whether you believe in God or not, there's no agenda to push God on anyone with the practice of Qigong. The practice of Qigong is for everyone. Everyone can do it regardless of their other beliefs, and it will not, you don't have to trade in your Jewish ID card or your Christian ID card to do Qigong with authenticity. You could actually make it a devotional practice. You could make it into a prayer if you wanted to. And I will talk about that in some future videos, but I'm deliberately not doing that at this point because I don't want to make it sound like Qigong is a Christian-oriented thing. It just isn't. It's also not intrinsically a Buddhist thing. It's also not intrinsically some weird Chinese religion you never heard of that's trying to trick you into getting you to believe in some weird false god. It's not that. If you learn more about it, you'll see that it's not. On the surface, if you refuse to learn the truth about it, I would say it's possible to have that misconception, but that's why I'm making this video, to try to communicate that with you. If you want to talk about this, I know a lot about the Bible. I'm happy to talk to you, and I feel that this is very compatible with Christianity as well. I don't think we need to split hairs on minor disagreements. Let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. When something's valuable and good, it's valuable and good. And just not every topic in life is a religious topic. Just like mathematics doesn't have a lot to do with religion. If you get really deeply into mathematics, you start to see the beauty of the structure of it, and then mathematics can certainly start to get into religious ideas as well. Everything can. If you go deeply into the mastery level of any topic, you'll start to see, maybe there's some higher power working here because, this is just too cool to happen on its own. So that's why we're here. But feel free to contact me personally, message me, leave a comment. I'd love to talk more about this because, this is interesting stuff. And when we talk and come together and have a conversation, we learn. So that is a good thing. When you just shut people off and say, no, I'm right, you're wrong, I can't even listen to you, well, nothing happens except for spite. So that's why we're here. That filled the day here. I hope that I cleared this up for you. I hope that if you were thinking Qigong was a religion, I hope that this assured you. I would suggest try it. You don't have to sign up for any kind of weird cult or anything. Just like if you went and tried some kind of aerobics routine, you could try Qigong and see what it's all about. And if you ever felt like it's not for you, well, then you know. Okay, so that would be good. But take the time to find out what it's about before you make those harsh judgments, because when you don't have all the information, how can you make a correct assessment of what something truly is? So I will see you tomorrow. I hope to have some comments over this. This should be a thought-provoking topic. I hope it got you curious enough to ask questions or share your opinions. I am recording these videos every day so that I can hear from you. That is my most thing that I look forward to. Spending all this time. It spends me about 3 hours to produce one of these videos, sometimes 4 hours. I'm doing it to hear from you, and I hope this reached you, and I hope that you got a benefit from it. And I'll see you tomorrow on day 11, where I'll probably have crossed the 20-pound weight loss through this fasting process. So for today, I'll say, Howla.